Here's a fun question. Who is the composer for the world of Deltarune? Well, you might say it's Toby Fox, maybe Lana Rain, Etoki Hana, Marcy Neighbors, or some other artist who is featured on a Deltarune track. Well, you'd be correct that they certainly composed the music to the hit indie video game Deltarune, while asking it in a way that is more befitting a Deltarune theorizing and analysis channel with the standard amount of Gaster brain. Let me rephrase. Who is the composer for the world of Deltarune to the characters of Deltarune? The reason I ask is that there's been a few little points of evidence leading us to the idea that some characters are indeed aware of the music around them. In that case, the music has to be coming from somewhere, so where might that be? And who might be making it? Welcome viewers, I'm Vivet Veritas, and this started as a quick little piece that I wanted to make while I work on the mammoth second part of the Fate theory, and has, predictably, quickly spiraled out of control. I'm no stranger to diegeticness, which is a very clunky word, but there isn't much better, and the topic of music has come up a few times in the community. I found the discussion interesting, albeit largely disorganized and inconclusive, so I thought I would take it on myself to make a case. In this video, we'll be looking at the evidence for and against the existence of diegetic music, the potential culprit of said music, and what this means for Deltarune. I have my assumptions as to what we'll find, but I think you'll be interested in the surprising complexity of the strengths and weaknesses of the theory itself. Before we begin, it's in my best interest to define our word of the day. I have been over this definition before, but just to be safe, diegesis is a narrative, and thus something being diegetic means that it is known or experienced by the characters within the narrative. For example, saving and loading in Undertale are diegetic as the characters are aware of them, but in most video games saving and restarting is not, as the characters don't know it's happening, and isn't meant to be taken as part of the world. I'm also going to preface this video with the fact that I am taking this far more seriously than I really think Toby Fox and the team has ever considered. I'm going to get very particular and specific, so I hope you can have a similar experience when engaging alongside me. With that out of the way, let's take a journey into the melodious and confusing world of Deltarune's soundtrack, and who can hear it. Join me, won't you? For the first time in over 3 years, we're returning to the well of diegetic material, something I talked about all the way back in my first video. In this video, what we're looking at is whether or not the music in Deltarune is diegetic, which is simultaneously much easier and much harder to analyze. You'll see what I mean as we get into it. Let's look at the evidence as to the existence of diegetic music, and to do that we first need to talk about things we're not looking for. We're not looking for tracks that comment on a character or area, nor are we looking at songs named after things in the world. For example, Hammer of Justice is not diegetic just because Gerson's title is the Hammer of Justice, or because he says the funny line. Another example would be The Place Where It Rained. Just because it's a reference to Undertale does not mean that it is actually part of the world. Essentially, all we are interested in is a song that can be heard by the characters within Deltarune. Likewise, leitmotifs play little to no role in the diegeticness of a song, though if one song that we know is diegetic has a leitmotif present in other songs, we may be able to make inferences based on that. Now that we've narrowed it down a bit, what have we got to work with? We have plenty of tracks that are explicitly coming from or made by someone specific. Pretty much every song associated with Sweet Cap'n Cakes falls into this category as they are actively making the music. Same with tracks like Cool Mixtape, A Simple Diversion, and Chill Jailbreak, Alarm to Study and Relax To. Additionally, some of the tracks that are in-universe jingles, like Mysterious Ringing or Soundcheck, clearly come from somewhere that the characters can hear. Some songs are visibly sung, such as Hymn by the Church Choir or Dark Sanctuary by the Mizzles, though the latter is predicated on the fact that the rest of the non-vocal music is also coming from somewhere. And when you play this track on the piano, Susie mentions that Ralsei was humming it earlier, and Ralsei is surprised, almost panicked, that Susie could hear it as well, so maybe the Mizzle singing was just a cool creative choice rather than something the characters were actually hearing. Other tracks that have a clear source are the old Jitterbug, Raise Up Your Bat, and Knock You Down a Rhythm version. There's quite a few tracks that might have a source, but it's a bit hard to tell. Half of the things in Cyberswell that I haven't already mentioned could have a plausible source somewhere, or have similarities to other songs like Keygen and Cool Beat. I'm also not sure how to categorize what I like to call the TV tracks. All the songs on screen take place on the TV within TV World, where we play the mini-games, and since it's its own TV with its own speaker, or from Tanner himself, I assume the music is coming from here. No one really comments on it though, so I suppose it's a bit of a moot point. There's also Onion and Susie talking about a song that they can hear, so I guess whatever that is also diegetic. I shudder to go back to that well. These are all the relatively easy ones to pinpoint, but we've got some more fun ones I've been saving for last. The earliest one is actually one of the more iconic moments in early Deltarune. When we explore our first Dark World, a little tooltip comes up with the world notifying us that the Field of Hopes and Dreams is playing. Well, hard to get more diegetic than that. Thanks, mysterious sign. I don't really have much else to say about this. It is literally pointed out not only to us, but to the characters within the game itself. While we're talking about Chapter 1, there's this one tidbit that isn't actually in the game anymore, but I still want to mention it. In the cut third board of Chapter 3, a quiz asks what the name of the forest in Chapter 1's Dark World is. Ralsei would have incorrectly guessed Scarlet Forest, then said, "Then wait, what's Scarlet Forest again?" implying that he is at least vaguely aware of the music track by the same name. And the most interesting, clearly diegetic songs are the ones that are played by Chris. We got a real treasure trove in Chapter 4, thanks to the presence of 2 pianos, which is the only thing better than 1 piano. Concert for You and Piano That Might Not Be Played Very Well are both soundtrack songs that are obviously played by Chris, as well as a litany of tracks that Chris plays automatically in Noelle's house when we don't have control over them that aren't included in the soundtrack. Some of these songs are ones that are unique to this moment or have been included before, like 7-4 or Quiz. There are a couple that stand out to me. One of them is Lance's theme, which is just... what? Why does Chris know this? No one else seems to indicate that they can hear it, but sure, maybe this is just in the world and Chris plays it because they like it. Lance's theme pales in comparison to what we now know to be the Chapter 5 shop theme, a song we heard from the first time from Chris, and now have heard from the December newsletter. I don't think I need to explain to you why Chris knowing music from the future that we have not heard raises some questions. To be clear, I think it's highly likely it's a song that exists within the world of Deltarune we just haven't seen yet, but I don't want to make any assumptions, and also, that's boring. The main piano of Chapter 4, where Piano That Might Not Be Played Very Well originates, also has some fun Easter eggs. Obviously all of these user-inputted songs are diegetic, though not true songs, and we get some fun reactions, normally just references to Undertale or the Dark Sanctuary one I mentioned earlier. The one that stands out the most is actually Rules' theme, which Ralsei and Susie comment on as indeed being his theme, though it's a bit ambiguous with Susie. Now, I guess that since both of them hear it, Rules could genuinely just be emanating the music itself, which is awesome, but I do think this is an example of genuine diegetic music. It's a bit annoying, but not all characters are aware of, or at least acknowledge, the music that plays, and it's quite variable as to who does and does not. Despite this, I'm not particularly worried by this point. Not only are there a lot more obvious problems with the theory anyway, but things that were diegetic in Undertale also were not always commented on or been aware of, such as saving and the narration. I do like the idea that everything is diegetic and they just don't question it. Hell, the Field and Hopes and Dreams point kind of helps this theory. That's the one I want to live in, and if nothing is ever mentioned or resolved again in the game, I'm going to believe that as fact. After looking at all the evidence, we know a few facts. 1. There are diegetic songs that are clearly composed by individuals within Deltarune, such as Queen, Napster Bleak, or someone further back in history. 2. There are diegetic songs that exist in the world that others can hear, which have no clear source, essentially true diegetic and the stuff we're really interested in. And 3. There are songs that both Chris and Ralsei know that others either do not comment on or could not know. So, what's next? Well, now that we've compiled our various pieces of evidence, we can finally do something with it. It's time to match a name to the work and see who is behind these mysterious tracks. When it comes to identifying a more overarching diegetic composer, the main weird tracks we need to explain are Scarlet Forest, Field of Hopes and Dreams, It's Pronounced Rules, Lancer, and Chapter 5 Shop somehow. Essentially, we need to find someone who fits a few categories. They need to have some kind of strong connection to both Ralsei and Chris, and they need to be aware of the gameplay aspects, both of which should be pretty easy. Our composer obviously needs to be aware of the Dark Worlds, ideally all of them, as well as particular characters like Lancer and Rules. Most importantly, since Chris knows the Chapter 5 shop theme, our character needs to have either heard this song as well, or they need to be either currently making or perceiving all of the events of Deltarune. Easy. Okay, here's the thing, dear viewers. I could do a bit here where we go over all the potential options for the role of composer within Deltarune, but the choices we have are very, very limited. However, that isn't going to stop me! There are 3 main, as well as a secret 0th option, which is that the music comes from whoever opens the Dark Fountain, but I don't like this. Although it does explain any given track in isolation, it also doesn't make sense in other areas. If the music comes from the creator of the Dark Fountain, then why do we get Dark, Second and Third Sanctuary all sounding similar, yet with different Dark Fountain creators? The idea of a diegetic composer for Deltarune is already tenuous enough, and I don't want to stretch it any further than we already have. The first real option is, of course, Toby Fox himself, or at least his Deltarune stand-in, the annoying dog. Toby Fox is the actual one making all of the Deltarune music in our world, so stands to reason that since he does have a version of himself in the game, he could simply be making the music in universe as well. We mostly see the annoying dog messing around in hidden areas and causing mischief, but it's also very difficult to tell where the annoying dog stops being a funny little Easter egg and starts being Toby himself. I'm hesitant to take this one particularly seriously due to the lack of evidence that the annoying dog as a character, rather than an author insert, is capable of much music related ability, but also, in case you couldn't tell, I want to get a little sillier than that. I'm not going to just say Toby Fox is the composer when he already is. Let's continue on. The second option is whoever is leading this survey program. This individual is probably Gaster, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm doing the classic blame everything on Gaster bit, so we'll call them the programmer, since the actual identity doesn't really matter. The fact that Ralsei specifically seems to be aware of the songs that not everyone else can hear, like Scarlet Forest, is a point in this idea's favour, as we all know by now that Ralsei has some kind of connection with the programmer. It sure does make sense that the orchestrator of the game we see is adding music into the game as we go. The main problem with the programmer theory is that, regardless of who it is, it doesn't seem like they actually made the world of Deltarune, only the tool we use to observe it. It seems that the programmer is tied to us somehow and isn't inherently aware of the future of Deltarune, or at least our presence in it, which means despite them being perhaps the most powerful entity in Deltarune, still doesn't account for the Chapter 5 shop theme. Certainly nothing, but doesn't really overlap with the weird mysteries that we've discussed so far. The third and final option is, perhaps surprisingly, Chris Dreamer. Many of the oddities can be explained by weird knowledge or just a source that we don't understand, but the particularly weird ones all involve Chris. Lance's theme is something that no one else comments on, yet Chris is aware of it nonetheless, but this could technically be one of those tracks that just no one else comments on. The shop theme, though, the one that even we don't know and we don't hear, means that Chris is actively creating new music within the world of Deltarune. We don't need to worry about some all-powerful observer of all future Deltarune chapters. They're just the original composer of the shop theme, I guess. This also gets the benefit of being able to ignore why Chris did or did not play certain music. They just didn't want to. They could potentially hear any boss theme, they just decided to play Lancer because they like it. So, I guess it's just Chris, right? Yeah, I wish it was that easy. Clearly this culprit doesn't account for any of the music in the light world, which is by itself a big problem. The difficult situation that the Chris theory runs into is that it kind of implies one of two things based on the explanation we want to go with. Either these songs do exist indeed within the world of Deltarune, and the music that plays has been made by Chris and is enriching these dark worlds with music that sometimes others can hear through magic, determination, dark fountain, something or other. Or the music is part of them and is somehow emanating out of Chris or the soul, and that the music in their head or heart is bleeding out into the world. If it's the former, then that raises a clear problem that, well, how could they have made songs like Scarlet Forest, Lancer, or Field of Hopes and Dreams if they didn't create that dark fountain? I know they could have, but I'd rather this theory work under the assumption of Chris having not made any dark fountains we haven't seen them make. If it's the latter, which is a lot easier to argue, it means that we don't need to care about who made the dark fountain, since we, being connected to Chris, are just hearing what's in Chris's head or emanating out of the soul, which could also be why Ralsei in particular seems to be aware of music that no one else is. This is actually much easier to understand, as this interpretation can range anywhere from the music in the background is literally what Chris is hearing, in cases like Him, Raise Up Your Bat, and the old Jitterbug, to Chris's presence as a musician is bestowing music upon our experience that we get to enjoy, such as Lancer, Field of Hopes and Dreams, and Scarlet Forest. In a world of imagination, it's fitting that Chris's imagined internal soundtrack may enrich our own experience. The problem with this point that you've probably picked up on is that music tends to play even if Chris isn't present. Think of such cases as Versus Susie, The Distance Between Two, and Another Hymn. But, something's present, isn't it? Probably not important. Here's my problem. I want it to be true that Chris Dreamer is as close to a composer in Deltarune as we are going to get. I think it's awesome if the music that we hear in the world, especially the bigger ones like Field of Hopes and Dreams, Cyber's World, and Dark Sanctuary, are somehow coming from them. Whether or not they genuinely wrote this music in the light world is not as relevant to me, but I do think that they are almost colouring the world with the music that we can hear. Unfortunately, the evidence is just not lining up. Regardless of the explanation we try to go with, I can't definitively prove anything. At this point, we have to accept a distinct possibility based on evident fact. As there are multiple songs made by different people in-universe, it is likely that there are multiple more thematic composers when it comes to our more general setting music, not just the ones I've been trying to specify. It's all well and good to say that Sweet Cap and Cakes made Holiday Studio, and so that technically makes them a composer, but we've always been interested in the bigger, vaguer ones. Who wrote The Holy? Who wrote Lantern? Who wrote Airwaves? All the pieces are here, they're just way too inconsistent, but I think that there is an answer here, somewhere. This whole time we've been looking at facts, at the raw data, but that's not what my channel is built on. This channel is built on thematics first, absolute derangement second, facts maybe fourth or fifth. The only way we can find out is if we continue further down into this thought experiment, and trust me, it is going to get exceptionally weird. You've been warned. Deeper we descend. Amongst all this evidence of at least some music being diegetic, which seems rather impossible to argue against regardless of its consistency, something stands out to me. Within the narrative of Deltarune so far, music doesn't really seem important. In Undertale, the narration and saving and loading helped us understand the world and the characters more, and enabled the game to comment on itself without ever breaking the fourth wall, completely and perfectly self-contained. If Deltarune is doing a similar thing, then how is music important to its themes? By understanding and answering this question, we may just be able to figure out who the composers may be, and for what purpose the music in Deltarune is diegetic. Let's crack this thematic nut by looking at our characters and how they represent the themes of the game. A great place to begin in any thematic analysis is with the main character. Regardless of whether or not Chris is the composer of Deltarune, music is undeniably part of their life. They are skilled at the piano, and they very rarely choose to cooperate when we try to imitate this skill. I really like this bit of characterization since Chris so rarely gets to assert themselves in the game, but this is the line they choose to draw. They're not going to help us with playing the piano or doing any music stuff, really. That's their thing, and as the Spamton sweepstakes reinforce, it's clearly important to them. It's something that's personal to them, not even letting Noelle see them do so. They don't seem to really like being observed doing it, though everyone knows it's them playing this beautiful music. In this way, it lets them express a side of themselves that even we are not normally privy to. Although I've mentioned Chris's connections with piano quite a bit, they're not the only one. In Chapter 4, we got a story from Susie about her experiences with the piano, and how she played but was shamed out of it to the point of destruction. Susie is a great example of the role that music tends to play in characters' lives, not only because of this anecdote, but the other ways she interacts with music. Her drumming is so ferocious that it gets tuned out of Raise Up Your Bat, and electric guitar is present in pretty much every song related to her. This very much gives the impression of her being a violent, somewhat aggressive person, yet her experiences with piano as well as Dessa's acoustic guitar show a softer side of her, a side where she can take down some of those walls around her. Many other characters have small but still significant connections with music playing or enjoyment, such as Noel and Azrael with the choir, Des with the guitar, and even Onion Sand with the Song from the Sea. In each case, this idea of music being a part of their identity that they only share with those closest to them, or are in some way a key part of their identity, is reinforced. Of course, at the end of the day, the intention of music in video games is largely to help tell a story, and to inform us of the characters and moments they are associated with, and I believe deeply in Deltarune's intention on commenting on the nature of stories. In this way, the music of Deltarune is similar to the narration of Undertale, as it not only lets us understand the characters, but also about the person who is doing the narration with the read text. This works so well in Deltarune especially due to the fact that both from our perspective as players and the perspective of the characters in-universe, music is being used as a tool to flesh out characterization. We learn more about a character based on their music, theme, or instruments, and music is used as a tool in the world of Deltarune to express complex feelings and deeper parts of a character's self. Music also ties into the theme of creation in Deltarune, since the aforementioned purpose of music is to tell a story, thus the creator of the music is also creating a story. This is a pretty easy connection to make, as music is inherently a creative process as an art form. It forms a pretty clear aspect of the image that has already been set up by the dark fountains representing creation. We now know that music is being used to strengthen two main themes of Deltarune, those of complexity and creation. It's something that the characters themselves are aware of, almost like the theme itself is diegetic. This sounds like I'm making a point here, and I guess I am, but mostly it's just cool. Now that we understand how music is being used, I did kind of promise that this would help us understand who the composer of all of this diegetic music actually is, so let's try. Looking back on our options, what does it mean for them to be the composer? How does it work with the two big ideas that we've discovered? Yeah, I'm not doing this bit again. Here, I'll put on screen what I would have said. The thing is, we already know it's not one of these three. That's the whole point of this exercise. We now know that the diegetic music, rather than just being pretty set flourish with any old person potentially being the composer, is actually an integral part of understanding Deltarune's themes, which means it can't really just be one specific character making all of the music. The truth lies somewhere deeper. Deltarune has gained a reputation for not being content with having its themes be perceived or experienced like any other game. It too is an active participant in its own story. Of course, all of the themes of the game are in the game, that's how media works, but think about things like the existence of Deltarune the program and Deltarune the world, as Deltarune commenting on itself with itself. In that case, the question of who is the composer of Deltarune becomes synonymous with where is the music of Deltarune coming from, which we can thankfully answer rather easily. The music is coming from Deltarune, which means that Deltarune is its own composer? What does that even mean? Well, it all comes back to Chris and the role that they have to play, even if it is not one of strictly composing. Chris has been gifted the soul as their role as a protagonist, as a hero. They may reckon it as a curse sometimes, but that soul is us, or at least represents us and the role we play. The ills of being a protagonist are many, and I have spoken about it at length before. However, it allows Chris to experience a story, and allows us to see it. This position of a protagonist is not unique to Chris either. Whether they realize it or not, Susie and Ralsei can align to the soul and hear the music too. This is not something inherent to Chris. It is the metatextual role of a protagonist that gives them a glimpse into the musical soul of Deltarune, and this too is made diegetic. Chris, Susie, and Ralsei all have to act. We're just here to watch, to survey. Even the hardest piece of the puzzle to answer, Chris knowing the Chapter 5 shop theme before we do, can be explained by this. Chris knows this song somehow, and it will appear again, whether thanks to our connection with Chris, or Chris's connection with the Chapter 5 Dark World. The characters of the game can hear the music of Deltarune through their role as protagonists, but you might notice yet again that there is music in the game that the characters can't possibly hear. Don't Forget, Another Hymn, Faint Glow, just to name a few. If we're saying that some of the music we know is diegetic, is part of the world, then under this idea, it all has to be. So how can these tracks be diegetic as well? This seems like an impossible question to tackle, but you know, there's a reason why I'm making this video, and it's not just to answer a fanciful question. I got my channel started by talking about the diegetic nature of control, but that's a bit of a misrepresentation. That whole video was underpinned by the fact that the player themselves, us, is diegetic to the world, and I still believe myself to be very right in that regard. Both in Deltarune and our world, the soul is this weird thing that lets us control Chris sometimes and interface with the world as a player, and makes our presence as a player real in the world of Deltarune, and thus lets the game comment on it or speak to us directly, like through the programmer. The soul is our connection to the world of Deltarune and how we experience it. Remember when I said the music is part of them and is somehow emanating out of Chris or the soul? In the business, we call that foreshadowing, since this is a lot closer to the truth than I implied. We just hadn't reached the level of context we needed to properly understand it. We are part of this game, and as such, technically, all the music we hear is inherently diegetic. Surprise, worms, it's all diegetic. Bet you didn't expect this. The soul acts like a sponge, soaking up everything that Deltarune has to offer, and fittingly, some of this is transferred to our unwilling vessel, who has knowledge and opinions of their own. Likewise, it is also filtered out to those connected to Chris and / all the soul, hence why people can hear as much of the music of Deltarune as they need to at any given moment. Maybe Chris hears it all, maybe they only hear bits and pieces. However, it doesn't matter what Chris hears, it's what we hear, or what is made for us to be heard. I'm not implying that being deaf means you can't experience Deltarune properly. The ability to actually hear the music is beside the point. The point is that, sure, Hometown can exist without us, but the game and story of Deltarune as a wider idea is predicated on the existence of a player, and that player is who the music is for. Of course, that doesn't mean that every single thing in Deltarune is technically diegetic, though, I don't know, you could probably make that argument. A bunch of stuff in the game is either part of the world to the characters already, or clearly for our eyes only. Music, though, is one of the core ways that the game speaks to both us, the real human playing, and to us as the player, the character in Deltarune. To properly answer the question that I asked at the very beginning of this video, who is the composer for the world of Deltarune? My answer is that many tracks in this game are made by many characters. Some are inherent to the world, some are created, but there is no one true composer. The music of Deltarune is made up of a hodgepodge of different people's melodies, their hopes and dreams given form. It is a way for their emotions to reach us, the player, and to enrich our experience, to tell us about the world we are in, to paint a picture, and to comment on the philosophy of stories. Every song in Deltarune is part of the world, whether or not they are heard by a character, because we are a character. In typical fashion, Deltarune has composed itself, and we are simply observing it. This is not me saying that there is no composer. I am saying that every single song is intentionally composed by the world of Deltarune through many different avenues, and as such, it is real to us, the true audience for this music. Music is inherent to Deltarune because it is a creation, and both inside and out of its own world, it is making this music as a way of understanding, of talking, of feeling. Deltarune makes the music for us. We just have to listen. Somehow I've managed to make a conclusion even more pointless than there is no composer, which is that, shockingly, Deltarune has music in it, and also that Deltarune is Deltarune. Jokes aside, I hope you can all see where I'm coming from on this kind of odd train of thought. This came up through talking to a myriad of people, and although I'm not entirely sure any of it makes any sense, I think it's an exceedingly entertaining idea. I can't wait to see what Chapter 5 does to this theory, but I think that it's mostly future-proofed from any way things like the shop theme can manifest. Thank you so much for watching as always. I have some grand designs for 2026, but I'm going to be exceptionally busy, so who knows if I'm going to have time to do everything. Fate Theory Part 2 is making excellent progress, but it's also going to still take so much longer. I've got so many other ideas in the back pocket though, so you shouldn't be without me for too long. Feel free to give this video a like and leave a comment on what you think about the music of Deltarune, or any thoughts you have really. I'm always looking for interesting discussions. Thank you so much to my patrons Meggy, Zalgo, Michael Bates, Tybia Fitzhugh and Nigel Robinson for your continued support. I will not forget your kindness. Reminder that it's a great New Year's resolution to support me on Patreon so you too can get in the credits for every video I make, plus some other bonus stuff. Check out the link in the description for more information. Until next time, I've been Vivid Veritas, and I'll see you again soon.